Welcome back to Reddit RX. On today's video, what's that can't stop laughing moment where you're in a situation you shouldn't be laughing? Back in 2004, I was at my cousin's funeral, and my aunt was in such a shocked state, she couldn't stop laughing. She was known to do this at funerals. Because laughing is contagious, I also started laughing a little bit, and I had to go to the back of the church and to the bathroom to get it out of me. I was at church for my grandfather's 5th year death anniversary, and the guy singing was so bad. My grandma and me were almost died from laughter. Edit. It was more of a memorial than an anniversary. At a funeral, the pastor kept referring to God as the great comforter, and all I could think of was a tacky bedspread glowing with holy light. Every time he said it, my giggles got worse to the point I had to pretend I was crying really hard and left to hide in the bathroom. I heard a kid fart in church during a wedding. I had to remove myself because I couldn't get it under control. It was one of those loud, echo of the old wooden pew farts. My mother and father went to a funeral of one of mother's aunts that she was not close to. In fact, my father had never met her. As they stood at the open casket, my father said to my mother, "She just doesn't look like herself again." My father had never seen the aunt before. For whatever reason, this struck my mother as very funny and she started laughing. She held her hands to her face and ran from the casket. Her sisters saw this and thought she distraught and followed her out to console her, where my mother had to explain that she was laughing and not crying and why. She was so pissed at my father. It was hilarious. Not me, but my friend. She was getting fired from her job, and all she could think about was, what'll it be, fellas? Mustard or ketchup? From the SpongeBob SquarePants movie. There's a scene in The Pianist, which is about the Holocaust, where a woman is shot in the street and her body folds in on itself as she falls to the ground. We watched that movie in sophomore year English class after reading the book Night by Elie Wiesel. It was completely silent in the classroom during virtually the whole film. But at that part in particular, some kid piped up from the back of the class into the silence with this sad, disappointed tone in his voice, like he just found out the lunch lady was out of chicken nuggets. Oh, she folded. So many of us busted out laughing. And it was completely inappropriate. And I could not help it at all. The teacher was not pleased. I had this really nice but really awkward physics teacher in high school. He was a large nerdy man but spoke with a lisp and a very soft voice. Imagine the guy from Office Space asking for his stapler. That's how he sounded. One day he is giving his lesson and mid-sentence, he goes from this voice to what sounded like Satan himself. "Okay class please," deep hell voice. "Take out your books." Cough cough. Excuse me, must have something in my throat. Then continued like nothing happened. I could not, for the life of me, stop fucking laughing. And I was the only fucking one. It was the most bizarre and fucking hilarious thing I had ever seen. I had to walk out of the class to catch my composure. This was at least 15 years ago now. And I'll never forget it. Visiting my grandmother's grave with my grandfather for the first time a few years ago. Expected tears and a solemn day. Instead we passed a grave marked Wanda, and my grandfather said, "Well, I wonder what killed her." None of us could stop laughing. My grandmother would have loved it. In school we did a course on mythology and had a project where we had to write our own mythological stories for the creation of creatures, places, etc. One kid wrote a story about how a man was abusing his horse, so the gods cursed him. One day his horse threw him onto a spear which went through the back of his head and out of his forehead, and he transformed into the first unicorn. I couldn't fucking stop laughing for a solid 5 minutes. The teacher berated me for laughing at violence, but the kid and I both thought that was funny as shit. IDK if there's a name for it, but when I get really nervous or scared, I start to laugh. Like, if it's bad enough, you'd think I was watching the best scene in the best Three Stooges skit ever made. So I was driving down the interstate when I saw deer bolt across. It got hit by a car in the oncoming lane, flew like a ragdoll in front of my 18-wheeler, and exploded. IDK what happened? There was just blood everywhere. It looked like I'd gone on a rampage in GTA, but with blood physics from Mortal Kombat. I pulled over to inspect the damage. Just blood and bits of flesh everywhere, and a cracked and bent grill. I got lucky. So I filled out a report with my company, and took off for a shop to see about fixing the grill, and hopefully a truck wash. And wouldn't you know, there's an open way station just ahead. The DOT officer came out to see me as soon I was in sight, and waved me over to the inspection area. He immediately starts laying into me about why the hell the front of my truck is covered in blood. And I am just laughing. I mean, I couldn't get a single word out. Every time I tried to say something, I got a few words out, and just burst out laughing. Finally his partner starts inspecting the truck, and finds a piece of a hoof. I slowly managed to calm down enough to talk, and we got it all sorted. Luckily the DOT officer was having a good day, because he decided not to write me a ticket, and let me use their water hose. They had on site to wash most of it off before I took it to a shop to repair the grill. Edit. I'm not a lawyer, so I can't quote chapter and verse, but some people are asking. So here's an answer. Some states have weird laws protecting wildlife, so if you hit them, you can be fined. I'm pretty sure this for specific animals like eagles, but I also have an ongoing fear of getting tickets every time I get inspected, so that was more of something I was relieved did not happen. My friends from college and I are still super close even 15 years later. There's an inside joke involving giving people a specific fake name that we always laugh about when we get together. Last week one of these friends tried to kill himself. We'll call him John. John's brother, another of the close friends, called me and told me that John had tried to kill himself and that he was at the hospital. Then he tells me that when asked for identification at the scene of the suicide attempt, John gave the paramedics a fake name from college. As sad as I was about what had happened, I bust out laughing so hard when he told me. I couldn't help it. I'm laughing now even thinking about it. All of the other members of the group had the same reaction when John's brother called them. All of them. We've got Lake of Fireside property in hell. Cheers. In high school there was 3 religion courses you could pick: Catholic, Evangelic. Edit. I'm told it's Protestant in English or neutral. You would have different topics in class and different destinations on the yearly trip. I picked Catholic, and on the yearly trip we went to a monastery. On the 3rd day one of the exercises was to talk about death, so there's 20 kids in a circle of chairs and everyone's crying because everyone lost a loved one at some point and death is a hard topic. The teacher starts talking about how she imagines death to be like and begins to tell. I imagine after dying there to be a long spiral staircase. And you go down and down until there's a door, and behind that door. The rest I didn't hear because my friend next to me whispers, "A Mufakun kebab stand." We both sat there giggling for like 20 more minutes until the meeting was over. To this day I feel really bad. Last year's Thanksgiving, right before the meal we all stood in a big circle and said a prayer and what we are thankful for. Well, my mom's uncle, I will refer to him as Uncle. His name is Dick. Yes, Uncle Dick. When we all stood up, it was revealed that Uncle Dick had forgotten to zip up his jeans after going to the bathroom. My dad and I were directly across from Uncle Dick, and we were barely keeping from bursting out in all our laughter. Then he leaned over to me and whispered, "I'm thankful that Uncle Dick remembered to put on fresh underwear this morning." About halfway through the meal we were still laughing about it when Grandma came over to yell at us for being distracting. She basically asked what we were laughing at in a not so nice voice. We pointed her gaze across the room and she couldn't help but laugh a bit. We told her it had been like that the whole meal. The way we had the tables set up was a big square of folding banquet tables, so we could look out straight ahead of us at Uncle Dick's boxes. My father's funeral. My daughter was 3 months old and have a lot of belly pain. She farted so loudly that the priest needed to stop talking for us to stop laughing. He even told us that the church was a serious place, and if we couldn't behave to get out. I told him the deceased was my father, and I couldn't control my daughter's farts. My granddad had If You Don't Know Me By Now played as the curtains closed at his funeral. Shouldn't have laughed. Couldn't help it. Legend. Edit. RIP my notifications. Thanks for the silver and pieces of flair. Used to be a member of student council back in college, and this one time during a meeting with the campus dean, who was explaining, very seriously, how some students were shitting on the toilet walls and throwing literal shit on the toilet ceilings, which were building up expenses for cleaning. Was asked to give ideas on how to tackle the issue. And I clearly remember trying not to laugh and holding it in perfectly. But then as I made eye contact with a friend of mine in the council, we bursted out laughing to the point where our stomachs started to hurt, which led to other members of the council laughing out loud. It was the first time meeting the campus dean as well. After that, anytime I'd see him, he'd give me a dirty look. When I worked with a financial advisor, he misspoke and asked me to check a client's investment in Blackcock instead of BlackRock, an industry fund. He didn't realize what he'd said, and he was super big on maintaining a professional, humorless working environment, so I couldn't point it out. I managed to keep a straight face long enough to excuse myself, then spent 15 minutes wheezing in a spare office. Was sat at dinner with friends this week, and one of the kiddos was saying they had extra stomachs for some particular food. Started talking about how cows had extra stomachs. Then somehow it got to comparing humans and cows, and one of them said in the brightest, most angelic voice, "But mum doesn't have udders." I made the mistake of glancing at her husband, and I swear the filthy twinkle in his eye was audible. Thank fuck. I have long hair. I dropped my head down to look at my plate, so my hair covered my expression, and sat there with my shoulders shaking silently. He asked in a rather amused voice if I was okay, as I appeared to be vibrating. Couldn't fucking breathe. During a cathedral confirmation liturgy, the bishop let out a resounding fart in the reverberant room as he elevated the host. Immediately, the deacon began swinging the incense pot, furible, because the altar boys kneeling directly behind the bishop started holding their noses and waving their hands. My senior year of high school, I went to this memorial breakfast with my principal and a few other seniors because my principal was begging a few of us to go, and hey, free breakfast. So getting to the end, this woman starts singing an incredibly moving song, and she's doing beautifully. But I look over at my principal and he just looks so dead. Like his face was completely blank, and because I also don't deal well with emotion apparently, I thought it was the funniest thing ever. So while this lady is singing and some people are crying, I am losing my mind and trying so hard to stop laughing. And I can't. My friends thought I was having a complete mental breakdown, like I'd finally lost my mind or something. I felt absolutely horrible about it and ducked out as soon as I could. Edit. This is the most liked thing I've ever posted on Reddit. And it's basically me being a horrible person by accident. But thank you anyway. On the best date of my life, I went to see a really stupid movie. A Walk to Remember, edit cause many are asking, with my first girlfriend. We were sitting in the 4th to 5th row from the screen, and 2 rows ahead of us were a group of younger girls. One of them is rushing back to her seat with her friends and she slips and falls. It was a nasty fall too, and even though I felt bad for her, I couldn't stop laughing. It was awful. I don't know why I couldn't stop. And I was even like, God, I know I shouldn't laugh, but that's just making me laugh harder. Double quote. It took me at least 10 minutes to stop. Girl who fell. If you're out there somewhere, I hope my laughing didn't make you feel bad. To this day I still don't really get why it was so damn funny to me. One time in church, a priest giving a sermon on how God is a part of our lives in every way and is always present, etc. It was a deathly quiet service, not the happy singing type. Unfortunately, he chose to end with the words, "Jesus is in the mix." After a few seconds of stifling, I laughed the place down and had to go outside. I still laugh at the idea of Jesus as the DJ of our lives. I was in a local support group for friends and relatives of people with bipolar disorder. One person was relating the story of her older teenage daughter who, in a manic episode, grabbed a flashlight and took it upon herself to stand in a downtown intersection and direct traffic until she was picked up by the police and taken to the hospital. I kind of covered my mouth and pretended I was having a coughing fit and excused myself to go to the restroom. Edit. Another person, her younger teenage daughter was in the emergency room getting stitched up after an episode of self-harm. One of the nurses was mean and implied she was a waste of space as opposed to the real patients and said, "You're just doing it for attention, right?" The daughter, irritated, said, "Yes, now gimme." I was able to not laugh at that one, but it was a close call. Edit 2. Younger teenage daughter getting her blood draw done once a month to check her lithium levels. Normally she absolutely hated to have it done to her and squirmed and sobbed and even put up a bit of a fuss, but this time she was kind of super calm and detached and blasé. Double quote. Okay, mom probably thought, getting this thing done is finally going smoothly for both of us, then out of nowhere the daughter asks, "Can you please take a few more of those tubes, full of my blood, and give them to me, so I can do an art project?" The nurse of course said no, and the mom was so startled and mortified she was speechless. Lithium carbonate is a medication used to treat bipolar disorder that requires frequent blood testing to make sure the level in a particular person is between effective and toxic, because this range is much narrower than most medications. Edit 3. Thanks for the awards. Edit 4. I'm getting PMs asking the name of the support group. It was in person at a local mental health clinic in the Minneapolis area, not online or national, and it's been a few years since I've been to it since my cousin moved to a different part of the country. Some older kid at my school ended up in a coma after taking N2O. I think he ended dying. So it's a pretty dark story. And one of the principals came into an assembly and angrily declared, "Nitrous oxide is no laughing matter." I think most of us were too young to know that nitrous oxide is laughing gas, but for some reason I knew, so everyone was silent, scared of the angry teacher, and I was just there trying not to laugh audibly. When my grandpa was dying, he would do a lot of black humor when me and him found hilarious. Just silly stuff. Well, the unfortunate happened and he passed away and was cremated. His ashes were put in a box and the box put in a M&S bag. So my aunt turns up to the plot and people are crying. And I swear I hear my grandpa say, "They better not have left me on the kitchen table." And I lost it to couldn't stop laughing. I could see in my mind's eye opening the bag and grandpa not there. I just couldn't stop laughing. My mum kinda got it when I explained it, as she knew that was something he would say. Guy on the train in visible pain after an exclamation of "Oh god" from inhaling my poisonous gas, and I can't control myself as he's gagging. Even off the train I continued to lose my composure and choke on unexpected laughter. Even years later I still do. ETA. Thank you fellow farty friends for making this my most awarded and upvoted comment. High school English class, which was first period. A few days before I got in trouble for sleeping and coming in late. My teacher called me a hibernating bear, which I found funny. A few days later we're doing oral book reports and this one kid with a stutter was doing his. The class was being patient with him, but he was struggling along. Then he gets to a point in his book where he talks about a bear, which he stuttered. That reminded me of how just a few days before I was called a bear and how funny I thought that was, so I busted up laughing. I was not laughing at him for stuttering, I was laughing at being reminded of being called a bear. However, I realized that's exactly what it looked like. The entire class gasped at me in horror. I didn't even try to defend myself, but I do promise it was not directed at him. It was at being called a bear myself. With a group of friends talking about random shit. After a while the topic of Alzheimer's disease comes up and a friend comments that his grandmother died of Alzheimer's. Another friend goes, "Didn't know you could die of Alzheimer's. Always thought you died of the complications." And then another friend casually blurts, "Maybe she just forgot she was alive." I had to leave the room because I was crying from laughing. When a police officer asked 15-year-old me if I had ordered drugs from somewhere. And I had to grin the whole time despite being innocent. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this Reddit story, please like, comment and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.